Now we are going to discuss about the panels. Graphical user interface is often organized in a hierarchical fashion or the hierarchical manner with the container called the panel inside the other container. So usually what we do that inside the frame we are not adding the low level components like a button or the text field or the label directly, but what we do, first we create a panel and then we add the panel in the frame. For example, if the frame has a border layout, then we are going to add the panel maybe for example in the center, and then we are going to set the layout for the panel itself. For example, the panel will also have a border layout. So in that situation the frame has the 5 areas and one of the area of the frame is center where we added the panel, and this panel will also have its own 5 area. So we can construct or we can build or we can add the 5 different component inside the panel. So this center area of the frame will have the 5 component, and we can do this thing in further nesting. So we will have the more options to construct the GUI by using the container inside the container. A panel is the object of the JPanel class that serve as a simple container. As I told you that we can add the components like a button, text field in the panel. It is used to group the smaller object into the larger component, that is the panel, that is the buttons can be grouped into the panel. Often the main function of the JPanel object is to subdivide a JFrame or the other container. So most frequently we are adding the different panels, multiple panels inside the frame, and within each panel we have a components like a button and the text field. So this is usually a construction we are using for our programs. Both the JFrame and each panel in a JFrame can use the different layout manager. So it is possible that we are using a layout for the frame. For example, the frame have a border layout and we are adding a panel in the center of this layout of this frame, that is in the center of the frame, and the panel will have some other layout or maybe the same. For example, the panel in the center may have a grid layout. So different combinations are possible. Additional panel can be added to each panel and each panel can have its own layout manager. So it is also possible that within the panel we are adding the further panel. So we can go to the further level of hierarchy or the complexity. This enables the almost any kind of overall layout to be used in the graphical user interfaces. For example, we are using a layout for the frame. As you can see that if we are writing this statement in the constructor of our class which is extending the frame, then the layout for the frame is going to the border layout. Then we are constructing the panel and we call this panel as some panel, and then we are setting the layout for this panel as the flow layout. So now here the layout for the frame is the border and the layout for the panel is the flow layout. So we are using the different layout in that situation. Note in the following example that panel and the button object are given color using the set background method without invoking the getContentPen method. We have seen that if you want to set the color for the frame, we are not using it directly calling the set background method. We have to first call the getContentPen, then from this method we are calling the set background. But for the panels we can directly call the method set background to set the background color for the panel. Now we are going to see the example which is describing that how we can use the panel. So I'm going to show you the Java code directly in the JCreator rather than showing in the lecture slide. So it is the same code which is shown in the lecture slide. So this is the class which is called the panel demo class, and this class is extending the JFrame. So it means that in this class we are using the constructor for the JFrame to do some initialization. So this is something like a extension or the subclass of the JFrame. In addition to that, we are writing one more line, one more statement after the extend JFrame, which is the implement the action listener interface. We want our program to be the interactive. When the user is doing some action, the program should respond. So we are implementing the interface which is called the action listener, and this action listener interface has only one method, which is the action perform method. So whenever a class is implementing a interface, the class has to implement the all the method defined inside the interface without changing the signature. uh, the class has to implement the body of the method. So we are going to implement the body of this method action perform, which is in the action listener interface. So let's see the how this program is organized and how the components are being added to the frame and the panels, how we construct the panel. So we are going to set the width and height, which are going to set the width and height of the frame, which is, you can say, like a bigger container. Then we are defining the three objects of the class JPanel: the red panel, the white panel, and the blue panel. So it means that we are going to use the three panel in this class. So now let's see the main program, or the main method. In the main method, we are simply calling the constructor of this class panel demo. So we have to invoke the constructor, so which is this constructor without any parameter. So it means that also that we are not writing the separate class to call this class, because we also have seen that how we can write a separate class which is calling the class which has the GUI component. But right now our main method is also in the same class, so we can run this program directly without need for the other class. And of course we have to make this frame visible, so we are calling the method setVisibleTrue by using the object which we have just defined. So now let's see the constructor for this class panel demo. And most of the time we are doing the initialization of our graphical component inside the constructor. So first we have called the constructor for the superclass to set the title for this frame, then setting the width and height for this frame, which we already defined as a final integer variables or the constants. Then we said that set default close operation exit on the close. So when we are going to close the frame, the program is going to be terminate. Then we set the layout for the frame, the border layout. So it means that the frame will have the 5 areas: center, north, south, east, and the west. Now we are going to construct the panels. We already defined these objects, but these objects are null. We have to create the objects in the constructor. So we define the red panel and setting the background for this red panel as the light gray. So from the class color we are using a constant light gray. And as you can see that we are not calling the getContentPan method. We are using the panel object and calling this method directly. So it is easier way to set the background for the panel. And then after this statement, we are adding the red panel in the bigger panel. So sorry, I did not describe these two statements. So let's see that what are these statements. So we are defining one panel which is called the bigger panel, and the layout for this bigger panel is the grid layout. So why we are constructing this bigger panel? The reason is that we are going to define the three panels later: red, the white, and the blue panel. And then we are going to add these three panels, the red, white, and the blue, which are like a small panel inside the bigger panel. So first we have defined the bigger panel so that we can add our smaller panel into the bigger panel. And remember this thing, the layout for the frame is a border, and the layout for this bigger panel is a grid layout. So meaning that this bigger panel can contain the component according to the number of rows and the column we have specified here. So this has the 1 row and the 3 column. So we can add the 3 different component in this bigger panel in the 1 row, in a single row, because there is only 1 row and there is a 3 column. And as I earlier described you that we create the red panel and then we added the red panel into the bigger panel. So this is going to be added in the row number 1, column number 1. Automatically they are going to be added in the bigger panel, moving from the row to the column. And then when the row is complete, we have to move to the next row, but right now we have only 1 row. Similarly, we are creating the white panel, setting the background of the white panel the same as the red panel, and then again similarly we are adding the white panel in the bigger panel. So now our bigger panel has the two component. Now the white panel is going to be added in the row number 1, column number 2. And then we are creating the blue panel, setting the background and adding the blue panel in the bigger panel. So we have added all the three panels, smaller panel into the bigger panel. The bigger panel has the grid layout, so these are going to be added in the row 1, column 1, row 2, column 2, row 3, column 3. Now finally what we are doing, we have to add the bigger panel into the frame, which is like a biggest container in our example. So we are adding the bigger panel into the frame because the frame has a border layout, so we have to specify the location because the border layout has the 5 areas are there. So we are adding the bigger panel in the center of the frame. Now after this thing, we are creating the one more panel here, which is called the button panel, and we have not declared this panel here because we are not using this panel outside the constructor. So if you want to define some variable which are going to be used in the action perform method outside the constructor, you are going to define them as a class variable. But if you want to construct some component of the GUI which are not going to be used outside the constructor, so then in that case it is better approach to define them inside the constructor. So we are trying to limit the visibility of these components. So we have defined the button panel in which we are going to add the buttons, and again setting the background for this button panel as the light gray and setting the layout for this button panel as the flow layout. So you can see that we are using a different layout for the different panels and the different component. Flow layout means that the components can be organized, or component can be added into the button panel from the left to the right, top to the bottom. How many components can be added in the row? It will depend on the size of the frame. Now inside this button panel we are going to add some buttons. So right now we are adding the button, we are creating the button object, and again this is defined inside the constructor. So we have created the red button with the label or with the title or the string as the red, setting the background of this button as the red using the constant, and then registering the listener for this button. So we are going to call the method add action listener, and our frame is actually the listener object. So we are passing this as the argument for this action listener. So it meaning that action perform method is going to be implemented in the same class. We are not passing the object of the other class. If we are implementing the action perform method in the some other class which is our listener class, then we have to create the object of the listener class, and then we have to pass this object to this method. And then after this statement we are adding the red button into the button panel which we have created here. Similarly we are going to create the white button. So the construction for the button is almost the same. We create the red button, now we create the white button, just we have changed the color for this white button and changing the string for this white button, and doing the same action, registering the listener, adding the button in the button panel. And finally we have added the we have created the blue button and added this button into the button panel. Now we have to add this button panel also in the frame because we already have the bigger panel in the center of the frame. Now we are adding this button into the button panel into the south. So it means that all of these buttons, that is the red button, white button, blue button buttons are inside the button panel, and button panel in the south of the frame, because this button panel is in the south of the frame. Because we have registered the listener for all of these buttons, so it means that now when the user is going to press any of these buttons, some action will be taken and the program is going to do something. So this has to be defined in the method action perform. Because our class was implementing the action listener, so we have to define the we have to write the body for this method. I told you earlier that we have very useful method. When the event is generated, we capture the information in the object, and then we have passed this object to the method action perform. Actually this is being automatically passed to the method action perform, and from this object you can name this object anything, but you cannot change the signature for these method. The public void action perform, the name of the method and the name of this class cannot be changed. Only you can change the name of this parameter E or this object E. Now we are going to get some useful information about the events by using this object, because the user can press any of the button, either the red or the white or the blue button. So we want to know that which button has been pressed by the user. So we are calling the method getActionCommand by this object eObject. So this is going to return the string of the button. Which string? When we have created the button, we have defined a string for each of these buttons. For the red button we have the string red, for the white we have the white, and for the blue we have the blue. So we will get the information that which button has been pressed. We are going to get the string for that button. Now we are going to write some conditions based on these based on this result, that if the button string is equal to the red, meaning that the user has pressed the red button, then change the background of the red panel to the red. Initially you see that every button has every panel has the background as the light gray. This is by default. Initially we define this thing as a light gray, but when the user is pressing the button, we are changing the background of the panel, not the button. User is pressing the button, but we are changing the background of the panel to the red, and it was defined as a gray initially. Similarly, when the user is pressing the white button, we are changing the background for the white panel as the white, and finally when the user is pressing the blue button, we are changing the background of the blue panel as the blue. But if something unexpected occur, because we cannot throw the exception in this method by definition, so we can write that unexpected error. So I am going to run this program. I am going to show the execution of this program. So you can see that initially when we have the output of this program, initially all the three panels are in the center. Right now you cannot distinguish them, these three panels, because they have the same color, but initially button have the different color. But these three panels are in the center of the frame, and this button panel is in the south of the frame. So when I press the red panel background change from the gray to the red. When I press the white panel background change from the gray to the white, and similarly when I finally press the blue, the background changes from the gray to the blue. So this was the execution of this program. So when I am going to close this frame, the program is going to be terminate. Let's move back to the slide. So what I explain you by showing the program in the Java IDE, you are going to see the same thing in this slide. So I am going to move through this slide quickly. We don't have to see them here. So this is the explanation of this program, and this is the output window. When the user is pressing the red button, the background for the red panel is changing. Now let's talk about the container class. Any class that is descendant class of the class container is considered to be the container class. So at the higher level we are defining a container class. So if some of the classes are extending the container class, they are itself working like a container, and from the name container you can imagine that they are going to hold the component, so they are working like a container. The container class is found in the Java AWT package, not in the Swing library. So again AWT package is being used. I told you that this package is an important package. We are going to use it from time to time. Any object that belong to a class derived from the container class or its descendants can have the component added to it. So in the container we can add the component. The classes JFrame and the JPanel are descendant class of the container. So that's why we can add the component into the frame directly, and we can add the component into the JPanel as well, because they are descendant. They are like a subclasses of the class container. Therefore they and any of their descendant can serve as a container. Now move to the next slide. The JComponent class. Any descendant class of the class JComponent is called the component class. So if some class is extending the JComponent, this is called the if some class is extending the component class, then this is called the descendant of the class JComponent. Any JComponent object or the component can be added to any container class object. So we can add the component any class which is extending the JComponent, which is a descendant of the JComponent, can be added to the container class. So it means that if some class is a descendant of the JComponent, we can add it into the container, and our containers are the panels and the frame, because it is derived from the container class. And interestingly, JComponent is also being derived from the container class. A JComponent can also be added to the other JComponent, because a container can hold the other component. So it means that the JComponent is itself a container. Then we can add the other we can add the one JComponent object into the other JComponent because they are working like a container. So again, a lot of flexibility is there in the hierarchy of these classes. Objects in a typical GUI. Almost every GUI built showing every GUI built showing using container classes will be made of the three kind of the object. So this is the usual hierarchy what we are doing when we are building or constructing the GUI using the showing containers classes. The container itself probably a panel or window like object. So a bigger container will be there. It may be a panel or it may be a frame. The component added to the container such as the label, button and the panel. So in this bigger container we are adding the component. The component can be like a low level components like a labels or the buttons or the text field, but it can be like a other container itself like a panel. So we are adding the maybe the panel in the frame or maybe panel in the frame. Then inside this panel we are adding the further components like labels and the buttons. A layout manager to position the component inside the container. And again we are going to use the layout manager for the different containers. Different container may have a different layout, the frame may have a different layout, and the panels which are added in the frame they can have a different layout, so that we can have a more flexibility in the organization of these components. So here the hierarchy is there. So you can see that we have a component class is there, which is extending the J object, and the container class is extending the subclass of the component, and then the subclasses of this container are the JComponent. And also that under the container we have the window and the frame, and we have the J frame, so which is from the showing. So the white one are showing from the showing. So then this which is something like a gray, they are from the AWT package. So you can see that our frame is also a container, but not directly coming under the hierarchy of frame and then window then to the container. Then within the JComponent we have the other containers are there, other components are there like a panels, like a label, like a menu bar, and abstract buttons are there. So this is the hierarchy of the showing and the AWT classes. The tip: code a GUI look and action separately. So meaning that when you are constructing a program which has a GUI, it is advisable that the part in which we are organizing our components, they should be separate from the part which is implementing the functionality, for example like a action perform method where we have to take some action. So do not mix up the construction of the component and what action we are doing with these components. This is the recommended approach. The task of designing a showing GUI can be divided into the two main tasks: designing and coding the appearance of the GUI on the screen. Many times we do this thing in the constructor. Designing and coding the action performed in response to the user action. So we have to do it separately, and many times we are even defining a separate classes for these listener classes, which are defining that what action to be taken when the user is pressing some component, clicking on some component, pressing the button, or maybe typing in the text field. It is useful to implement the action perform method as a stub until the GUI looks the way it should be. So when you are building the GUI program, of course if your class is implementing the action listener interface, your program is not going to be compiled unless you implement the action perform method. But unless you do not complete the GUI part, just write this thing like a stub, means that you are writing the body of the method empty body. So we are not doing anything. So once the GUI has been completed, you have tested the GUI, all the components are in the proper position, in the proper layout, then write the code for the action perform method. This philosophy is the heart of the technique used by the model view controller pattern. So you can see a design pattern is there which is following this methodology. So we have the model is there, we have the controller is there, we have the view is there. View means that how we are going to view the organization for these components, how the final view is there for these components. And the controller means that how we are giving the input and the output to the model. And the model is going to use the data from the controller, maybe some input is there, and it is going to process this data, it process this input and maybe generating some data, and this data can be viewed. Maybe we are processing something, we are getting some result, we are doing some calculation, and we have to show these results in some view, in some component. So this is going to be shown in the view. So our organization is going from the controller to the model, and then from model to the view. We have to keep them separate. Now let's talk about the menus, menu bar, menus, and the menu item. So now we want to have some additional functionality in the program. That is, we want to add the menu bar, menus, and the menu item. A menu is an object of the class JMenu. A choice on a menu is called the menu item. So first we have to usually create the JMenu, and within this JMenu we are going to add some items. For example, if our menu is like a file menu, then there should be some item inside this file menu. For example, save, maybe open, maybe print, maybe close, like this thing. So these items are like a object of the class JMenu item. A menu can contain any number of menu item. A menu item is identified by the string that label it and display in the order to which it has been added to the menu. So when you are creating the menu, you have to specify the string for this. When you are creating the menu item, you have to specify the string for this menu item. For example, open. So the open is the string. Of course, you can write any name for the object, but there should be some string associated with that object. So we are calling this thing as a label, and we can add these menu item into the menu, which is like a bigger container. The add method is used to add a menu item to a menu. So we are adding the menu item like a open or the close inside the menu, which is like a file menu, in the same way that a component is added to a container object. So as we have seen previously, we have a panel. Inside the panel we are adding the buttons and the text field, like this thing. So now we have a menu. Inside the menu we are adding the menu item. The following: create a new menu and then add the menu item to it. So this is the example. First we create the menu, we create the menu object JMenu, and the menu object is the dinner, equal new operator, again a class name, and then this is the string or the label for this menu. So this is working like a bigger container. Inside this menu we can add the menu item, usually more than one menu item. So we create the first menu item, JMenu item. This is the lunch, and then equal new, again the JMenu item, and the lunch special. So this is one of the item which we have created, and we are going to add this menu item to the menu. How we are going to add? We are going to call the bigger container, that is the menu dinner. We are calling the method add, and we are passing the object of the menu item. So this statement can be repeated many times if we are adding the menu item inside the menu, and this is going to be changed because each menu item will have the different name. For example, the lunch, maybe the breakfast, or maybe the some other thing. And of course, if you want to implement the action listener for this menu item, we have to call the method add action listener, and we have to call the add action listener method with this menu item object, not with the menu, because when the user is going to press this menu item, then the event is generated. So we have to call the method action listener from this object, and we are passing the argument for the listener class, which is holding the information about the listener object as this. This means that this is going to be implemented in the same class which is implementing the actual listener interface, or otherwise it can be a separate class. The class JMenu is a descendant of the class JMenu item class. So again, the interesting fact is that though we are adding the menu item inside the JMenu, but the JMenu is a descendant class of the JMenu item. So what it means? We can have a nested hierarchy can be there. Every JMenu can be a menu item in the other menu. So it means that we can add the JMenu as an item to the other menu. So maybe there are more options are there in the save. So in the save we want to apply the more options, save as, or maybe save by some default name. So we can create the further construction for these menu item. Therefore the menus can be nested. The menus can be added to other menus in the same way as the menu item. So we are going to create the at the higher level we are going to create the menu, for example the file menu. Then if you want to create the further nesting, then we are going to create the save not as a menu item but as the menu. So this menu, save menu, is going to be added to the other menu, which is the file menu, and then within this save menu we are going to add the menu item, maybe the save as or something like that, save at the current or the default location. A menu bar is a container for the menus. So now we have seen that menus are the container for the menu item, but itself for the menus there is a container which is called the menu bar, typically placed near the top of the windowing interface. So as you know that in many programs we have a menu bar is there, and then in the menu bar we have the file menu, maybe we have a edit menu, or maybe other menus are there, and then within these each of these menus we have the menu items are there. Maybe file can be open or can be like a save. So how we can add these menus to the menu item? The add method is used to add a menu to a menu bar. In the same way the menu item are added to the menu. So we have to create the object of the JMenu bar, and then we have to add the menu to the menu bar. So we have to call the add method from this object which belong to the class JMenu bar, and then we are going to pass our menu as a dinner menu, which we have seen the example. The dinner menu itself contains the menu item. So we are adding the menu which is the we are adding the menu which is the dinner into the menu bar which is the bar. The menu bar can be added to a JFrame into the two different ways. So we have to add it. Now we have to add further more thing. We have to add the menu bar into the frame, because maybe the frame may be the outer or the maybe the biggest container for our program. So we can add the menu bar into the frame by using the method set JMenuBar, and we are going to pass our menu bar object to this method set JMenuBar. We are passing our menu bar. So the hierarchy is something like that. Inside the frame we have the menu bar, and then inside the menu bar we have the many menus are there, and then inside of these menus we have the menu items are there. So this is the usual hierarchy we are using the add method, which can be used to add a menu bar to a JFrame or any other container. So we can also use the add method, and also we can use the set JMenuBar to add the menu bar into the frame. Now there is some example is there which is the example for the menu demo. So I am going to show you this example, how this example is working. Example name is the menu demo. So I have in the same application the JCreator was already open, so I prefer to drag and drop the menu demo class in the same application. Otherwise I can open the JCreator another version, or another time I can open the JCreator, but preferably we should add in the same application which is running to save our resources. So this was the previous program panel demo, and this is the program menu demo. So now let's discuss this program. Of course, at the beginning of each program we have to import the required packages and the classes. So we have a class menu demo which is extending the JFrame and implementing the action listener interface. So this is the same hierarchy we have used for the previous program. Our class is extending the JFrame and it is implementing the action listener interface. So it contains the method action perform. Before I am going to explain you the body of this program, let's see that what this program is doing. I am showing the output of this program. I am running this program. So this is the output for this program. In this program you can see that we have a frame. In the frame we have a menu bar, and in the menu bar right now we have only the one menu is there, add color, and within this menu we have the menu items are there, the red, the white and the blue. And when I am going to click one of these menu item, some action will be taken by the program, some event is going to be generated. So when I am going to click on this menu item red, so this panel is going to be change the color to the red. The second panel is changing the color from the gray to the white. The third panel is changing the color from the gray to the blue. So you have seen that this program is working the same way as the previous program in terms of the functionality, but the graphical components are being a little bit changed. Rather than using the buttons, we have created the menu, and inside the menu we have added the menu item. So let's see how the construction of this program is there. So we have the static final variable width and height, and we are defining the three panel. Again, these things are the same like a previous program. We are in the main method we are calling the constructor for this class and setting this frame because our class is extending the frame as visible. Now in the constructor we are going to build our GUI. Calling the constructor for the superclass, setting the title, set default close operation, JFrame exit on close. They are almost the same in our program. Maybe we sometime we change the title or the string for this frame. Now this bigger frame has the layout as the grid layout. So this is changed because last time it was a border layout, because we want to use the many area of the frame. Something we want to add in the center and then something into the south. But right now we are saying that just this frame has the only one row and the three column, because we are not creating the button panel. We have to add the smaller panel directly into the frame. So that's why we define the layout for this frame as a grid layout. Now we are going to create the three smaller panels which we already defined. The red panel, create the object, set the background. Initially we create the background for each of these panels as a light gray, and adding this panel into the frame directly. We are not creating the bigger panel as we have done in the previous. So we are adding the panel directly into the frame. So we are calling the method add. Then we are similarly we are creating the white panel and adding the white panel into the frame. So this one is the red panel is going to be added in the row number 1, column number 1, because we have the one row and the three column. The white is going to be added in the row number 1, column number 2, and the blue is going to be added in the row number 1, column number 3. So we have used all the three areas for this our frame: the first row, first column, first row, second column, first row, third column. Then we are going to create the menu, the color menu, because we are using the example for the menu. So we create the color menu, and then in this color menu we have to add the menu items. So we have to create the three menu items. We are creating the first menu item from the class JMenuItem, and this menu item has the object name as the red choice, and there is some label or the title for this menu item as the red. So when I press the button of the color menu, you have add color option of the color menu. Then you have seen that the three options was there: the red, the white and the blue. But we are doing one more thing here, that we are registering a listener for this menu item, because when the user is pressing these menu items, some action has to be changed. We have to change the background of the panel. So, and then finally adding this menu item to the menu. So this menu item red choice is going to be added to the color menu. So the bigger container you have to write before the add. You write the bigger container dot, then call the add method, then write your small component like here the JMenuItem red choice. Similar thing we are going to do with the other two menu item. We have to create the white choice, the second menu item. We have to create the blue choice, the third menu item. So we have the menu in which we have the three menu items are there, but we have to add the menu itself into the menu bar. So we have to also create the menu bar. So we are creating the menu bar object and then adding the color menu into the menu bar. So right now we are only adding the one menu into the menu bar, but in many programs we are going to create the many menus like a file menu, edit menu, view menu, and each of these menus are going to be added into the menu bar. So we are adding this only the one menu into the menu bar, and then we have to add finally our menu bar to the frame. So we are calling the method set JMenuBar and we are passing the menu, we are passing the bar as an object, so that this menu bar is going to be added into the frame. Now let's see the body for the action perform method. When the user is pressing one of these menu items, some action has to be taken. An event is going to be generated. Event object is going to be passed to the action perform method. So this will contain the information about the event. So we get again like in the previous program, we get the information about the event, we get the string, and then we are writing the condition. If the button string equal to the red, so it means that the user has pressed the menu item which has the string red. So it meaning that user has pressed this menu item, red choice, but the string is the red, so we are getting the string as a red. So when user is pressing this menu item, we are not changing the color for this menu item, but we are changing the color for the panel. So that's why we have defined these variables outside the constructor as a class variable, so we can access these in the action perform method. So we change the background for the red panel as the red. Similar action will be done for the white panel and the blue panel. Depending on that, if we have a string equal to the white, we are going to change the background of the white panel, and if the string is the blue, we are going to change the background for the blue panel. So as you have seen that this program was working the same way as the previous program in terms of the functionality, but instead of the construction, we are using the different component. Rather than using the buttons, we are using the menus and the menu items. So here in the lecture slide, you are going to see the same thing which I described to you. Now let's talk about the abstract button and the dimension classes. The class JButton and the JMenu item are the derived classes of the abstract class named the abstract button. So at the higher level, we have an abstract button class, and then the JButton and the JMenu item are the derived class for this abstract button. So they are working like some button that when we press them, some event is generated and we are taking some action. All their basic properties and the method are inherited from the class abstract button. Object of the dimension class are used with the buttons menu item and their object to specify the size. So if we have to specify the size for these buttons and for these menu item, we have to use the class dimension, and we have to pass the two parameter, that is the width and height, to the constructor for the class dimension if you want to specify the dimension for these buttons and these menu items. When a user clicks a button or the menu item, an event is fired or generated that normally goes to one or more action listener. So an event is fired or generated, an event object is created, and this is going to pass to the listener class or maybe to the action perform method or maybe any other listener. Right now we have seen the example that we are using only the action listener interface. We are implementing the action perform method, but there are many other kind of listeners are there, like a mouse listener. Within the mouse listener, there are the many methods are there. So if we are implementing the mouse listener interface, we have to implement those methods. This action event include a string instance variable called the action command for the button or the menu item. So we are going to get the information about the string. So by using the object E, which is from the action event, we can know that which menu item or which button has been pressed, because every menu item and every button will have some string. So once we get the information about the string, we can take some action. The default value for this string is the string written or on the button or on the menu item. This string can be retrieved from with the get action command method, that is the get action command. So we can retrieve this string to know that which button or which menu item has been pressed. Then we can write the conditions. There is one more method is there which is called the set action command method, can be used to change the action command for a component. This is especially useful when two or more buttons or the menu item have the same default command. So it might be happen that if you are defining the two buttons with the same string, then in that situation, if you are want to know that which button has been pressed, then because both the buttons or the menu item have the same string, then it's not being clear that which has been pressed. So in that situation, we have to change the action command for these buttons so that they can be distinguishable when we want to get the information about these buttons which has been pressed. So we can use the method set action command. So for example, if our next button has a string next when we define this button, but before writing any implementation for the action perform method, we are going to write this thing next button set action command next button. So it means that we are going to identify the next button with the string next button, not with the next, but with the string next button. Similarly, if we are defining the J menu item with the string next, so you can see that both of these strings are the same. So we are going to use again the method set action command, and we are going to identify the string for this J menu item, that is the choose, by the new string which we have defined just now, next menu item. So in that situation, if the two buttons or one button or one menu item, they have the same kind of a string, we can use this set action command. There are some other methods are there also in the class AbstractButton. So if you are using the J button or if you are using a J menu item, we can use them. And from the name, you may have an idea that what these are going to do. Set the background, changing the background, add action listener, registering the listener, remove the action listener, remove the listener, then no action will be taken if the user is pressing these buttons. Set action command, which we have just seen. Get action command, which we have used. Set the text, we can set the text for these items, for if you want to maybe change the text. Get the text for these items, for the button or for the menu item. And then if you want to change the size, we can call the method set preferred size, but we are not passing the here in this constructor directly the width and height. We are passing the object of the class dimension. So alternatively, we can write this thing as in the set preferred size, we are creating the anonymous object of the class dimension, and we are passing the width and height to the dimension object to set the preferred size for these component. Again, more methods are there, so I'm not going to discuss them. You can see the definition of these later. Listener as the inner class is often, instead of having one action listener object deal with all the action event in a GUI, separate action listener class is created for each of the menu item. So right now we have seen that in which we have the many items are there, many components are there like a button or the menu item, but only the one action perform method was there, and in that action perform method we get the string about the item, about the button or the menu item. Then based on this string we write the condition. If the string is red, then do this thing. If the string is the green or the blue, do this thing. So this is the one approach. But the second approach is that we are going to write the separate we are going to implement the separate action perform method for each of these items, either the menu item or the button. So in that situation we have to write the many action listener classes as the inner class of our main class, which extending the J frame, and inside each of these inner classes we are going to implement the action perform method. So this is the approach we are discussing. So our listener classes are going to be the inner classes. So we are going to write the listener class for each of these components separately, but not as a separate class, but as a inner class. Each button or the menu item has its own unique action listener. There is no need for a multi-way if statement. So advantage for this approach is that you don't have to write the if condition, because there is a separate listener for each of these component. When this approach is used, each class is usually made a private inner class. Now we have to see the demonstration for this class. So the program name is the inner listener demo. So I'm going to open the JCreator to show you the demonstration for this program, that the inner listener demo. So let's open this inner listener demo, then go to the file manager, inner listener demo. So before I explain you the code for this program, I am going to run this program. So this is the output for this program. You see that working in the same way. We have the menu and the menu item red, white and the blue. So this program is working like the same program we have used, we have discussed previously, how we add the menus and the menu item. So but this time we are not changing the GUI, we are changing that how we implement the inner classes. So our handling of the event is different in this situation, in this example. So let's see that how this class is working. So we have a class in a listener demo extend the JFrame. Right now, one more thing is different here. You will notice this thing before I proceed, that we are not implementing the action listener interface. In the previous classes, we have implemented the action listener interface. If I go back to the class, for example, menu demo, implement the action listener interface. So our class was implementing the action listener interface, but in this, our class is not implementing the action listener interface. We will see that how we are going to do this thing. Now we are defining the same way. We are defining the static final variable constant width and height to set the height and width of the frame. We are defining the 3 panels. But after this thing, we are defining the 3 inner classes in which we are implementing the action listener interface. Red listener, which is implementing the action listener interface, and this interface has only one method, action perform, and we are implementing this method here. So this class is from here to here only. This is the inner class of the class inner listener demo. So I can fold this class, I can open this class. So we have the 3 inner classes are there. I am going to fold these 3. So these are the 3 inner classes: red listener, white listener, and the blue listener. So these are implemented inside the class inner listener demo. So these classes have their own action perform method, because each of these classes is implementing the action perform, implementing action listener interface. So they have the action perform method, and the action perform method for these classes is very straightforward, just one line. So the meaning is that when the user is going to press the specific menu item, for example the red, we have to change the background for the red panel. So the red panel set background color red. So it meaning that an event is going to be created, an event is going to be generated, an event object is going to be created, and the listener object will contain the information about the event. Since at this time we are registering the separate, we have to register the separate listener classes for each of these menu items. So we don't have to write the condition in that situation. We can directly write the set the background, because the listener for these menu items are going to be separate. We are going to see just after discussing these 3 classes. So similar code is there for the white listener. We have to change the background for the white panel, and we have to in the blue listener class we have to change the background for the blue panel. In the main method we are calling the constructor for the our bigger class or the most outer class, the inner listener demo, and in the class inner listener demo we are constructing our GUI. So our GUI construction remain the same, but our listeners are going to be registered in such a way that we are registering the listener for the different classes. Let's see. So doing some initialization, and again like a previous program, our main frame has the grid layout, 1 row and the 3 column. So we create the red panel, the white panel, and the blue panel. Nothing has been changed, everything is like in the previous program. Now we have created the color menu. In the menu we have to add the menu item. So we have created the first menu item, the red choice, but this time here we are going to call the add action listener method from this object J menu item, but this time we are not passing the object of the current class this, because our action perform method is not in this class, but we are writing the separate inner class. So we have a separate inner class which is the red listener. So meaning is that an event object is created and the listener object is being passed to the method action perform, to this class action perform method, not to any other class, because we have registered the listener for the red choice only for this class, not for any other class. So again the same thing will be done for the white choice. So we have the J menu item, we register the listener, but our listener object belong to the class white listener. Similarly for the blue choice, our listener object belong to the class blue listener. So we have the 3 different classes are there which are handling the events in which we have to implement the action perform method. And finally this code remain the same. We have to create the menu bar, we have to add the menu, the color menu into the menu bar, and we have to add the menu bar into the frame. So this is the other way we can handle the events, rather than implementing the action listener interface in only the one class. We can write the separate classes for these interface which are implementing the action interface separately. Each class is going to implement it. So this was the demonstration for this program, and the same code is there which I discussed with you. And now after this, let's discuss about the other component like text fields and the text area. A text field is an object of the class JText. It is displayed as a field that allows the user to enter the single line of the text. So if the user want to enter something, we want to give some area to the user, some space to the user, we can create the object of the class JText field. So we have to define the object of the class JText field, and then if we are creating the actual object here, this is the object without, this is a null object. Now if you want to create the actual object, we have to write again the statement new JText field, and we have to pass the number of character, which meaning that at least how many character can be written in a text field. For example, if it is a 10, so meaning that 10 or more character can be written or typed in the text field. There is also a container which one additional string parameter for displaying the initial string. So one more constructor for the JText field is that you are also specifying the string, then you specify the size for this text field. So you can say that this is like a default string which is going to be shown in the text field. So when the user is going to type, of course this string is going to be removed, but there can be some default string which is giving the hint or the clue to the user what to type. We can get the string which is the current string in the text field by the method getText. So we have to write the object name, then call the method getText. So we are going to get the string, input string, we have to assign it to some string variable. If you want to change the text in the text field not by the user typing but inside the program, then we can call the method setText, and we can pass any string to this method, and the text of the text field is going to be changed. So this is the example. Example name is the text field demo. So I am going to show you this example text field demo. Before I am going to explain the program, I am going to show you the output of this program. So this is the output for this program. In this program you can see that there is some label is there, enter your name here, and there is some text field is there. I can type my name here. For example, I am typing my name, and then I am pressing the button click me. So it is changing the text in the text field, writing the hello before my name, then writing my name Murtaza Khan. If I am going to press the clear, it is going to clear the text field. So here you are going to notice that before we discuss the GUI, it seems that there are the two bigger areas are there. One in the pink color in which we have the two buttons are there, and the other area which contain the label and the text field. So this is a kind of construction. So we may have a assumption, or we may guess that what kind of layout is there. So it seems that we are using the two areas, and in one of the area we are adding the buttons, in the other area we are using the label and the text field, and they are being put in the bigger frame. So let's see how this program is working. So class text field demo extend the JFrame, implement the action listener interface. So we have used the approach in which our class is also implementing the action listener interface. So it means that there is only one class which is doing the many things, constructing the or building the GUI and also implementing the action listener interface, writing the body for the action perform method. We define the final integer width and height to set the width and height of the frame, but this time one more variable or the constant we are defining the number of characters. We are defining this because we want to define that how many characters at least can be typed in the text field. So this is the 30. And we are also defining our text field object name, and we are also defining this thing as a class variable, not inside the constructor, because we want to access it outside the constructor. So we define as a class variable outside the constructor. Then in the main method we are doing the same thing. We are calling the constructor for the class text field demo. Again doing the same thing, setting the title and the size for this frame, default clause operation, and we are setting the layout for this frame as a grid layout. So it means that the frame will have the 2 rows and the 1 column, because the first parameter is the number of rows and the second is the number of columns. Then we are going to create the panel. We are going to create the name panel, and then setting the layout for this name panel as the border layout. Now the border layout has the 5 areas: center, north, south, east, west. We may use one or more areas. We are not compulsory required to use all the areas. And then setting the background for this name panel as the white. So when you have seen the output, you can see that this panel, which is at the upper side of this GUI, has a white background. Then we are going to create the text field actual object by using the constant which we have defined, 30 characters. And then we are going to add the text field into the name panel. So we are calling the add method from the name panel. We are adding the text field. We are going to create one more component, that is the label, because we want to give the user some clue, some idea what to type in the text field. So we create the label, and initially this label has the string enter your name here. So you see that this was being shown there, that enter your name here before the text field. And then we are adding this label into the name panel. So this name panel contains the two components. It contains the text field, and it contains the name label, which is the label enter your name here. And we are adding this into the center for this panel, because this panel has the border layout. So we are adding this label into the center, and the text field was added in the south. So if I go back to the GUI, so you can see that this label is in the center and this text field in the south, but the panel itself is in the grid of the frame, so which is the row number 1. But here inside this panel we have a different layout, which is the border layout. So one of the component, the label, is being added in the center of the panel, and then text field is being added in the south of the panel, that is the name panel. And then finally here, after these adding these two things into the name panel, we are adding the name panel into the frame, that is in the row number 1. Then afterward we are creating the another panel, which is the button panel, in which we will have the two buttons are there. And then setting the layout for this button panel as the flow layout. Components are going to be organized from the left to the right, top to the bottom. Setting the background for this button panel as the pink. Then creating the two buttons. First we are going to create the action button, which has the string click me, and then registering the listener for this button. And now this time you see that we pass the object of the current class. This means that the action perform method is implemented in this class. And then adding this button into the button panel. So call the method add by this object button panel and adding the button action button. Similarly, we have to create one more button, which is the clear button. We have to register the listener for this button. We have to add this button in the button panel, and then adding the button panel into the frame, which is going to be added in the row number 2, because our main frame has the 2 rows and 1 column. Now in the action perform method, because we have not written a separate inner classes, we have to call this method getAction command to know that user has pressed which button. Either the user has pressed the click me button or the clear button. If the user has pressed the click me button, then in that case what to do? Set the text of the text field. What to do? From the text field, call the method set text, and then write the string hello, and then space, then concatenate this string with the current string of the text field. And how we get the current string of the text field? By calling the method getText from the text field object. So we get the current text, we concatenate with the hello and the space, and then write this again in the text field. But if the user is pressing the clear button, which has the string clear, then set the text field as empty. So we are writing the empty string here. So this was the execution of the program. So I'm going to terminate this. So we have seen that how the text field is working, and this is showing the output. The text area is somewhat similar to the text field, but with the multiple lines. A text area is object of the class JTextArea. It is the same as the it is the same as the text field, except that it allows the multiple line. Two parameters to the text area constructor specify the minimum number of lines and the minimum number of characters per line that are guaranteed to be visible. So when we are defining a text area, we have to define the two parameter, how many lines are there, and how many character, minimum 20 character can be written in a line. We can use one more constructor for the text area in which we specify the initial text. Enter the text here, and when we write the \9 means that we are going to change the line, move to the new line after the enter. The line wrapping policy for the JText area can be used using the method setLineWrap. This method take one boolean type argument. If this argument is the true, then additional character at the end of the line will appear on the following line of the text area. So if we are writing a line which has the number of characters which are exceeding the size of the text area, how many character can be in one line. So in that situation we can define a policy. Either we should keep the character in the same line even though may not be visible, because our text area cannot show the character more than the level or more than the number of character we have set. Or we can write a policy in which the line is going to be automatically wrapped. The character is going to be shown into the next line by this policy. So we are going to say that if they are going to appear into the next line, then we have to call the method setLineWrap with the value of true. But if we want that, we do not want the characters of the line 1 into the line 2, then we have to set the policy and we have to call the method setLineUp as the false. The extra character will remain on the same line and they are not going to be visible. Why they are not going to be visible? Because for example we are going to say that there can be 20 character can be in a line. So if you are typing maybe 30 characters, then they are not going to be visible because each line can show roughly 20 characters. Now two more methods are one more method which we will describe here is being used very commonly. This method is called the setEditable. SetEditable means that either the user is allowed to edit the text field or not, and similarly for the text area. So if we call this method with the argument false, then it means that the user cannot change the text of the text area or the text field. But if the user can change the text area of the text field or the text of the text area or the text field, then the argument is going to be the true. Sometimes you need that setEditable false. Maybe something is fixed which cannot be changed for all the users, then we can say that setEditable false. In order to label one or more text fields, you use an object of the class JLabel. We have already used this thing, that before the text field or maybe above the text field we can define some label which is going to give a hint or the clue to the user what to type in the text field or in the text area. So we can use this thing and we can add this component into the panel or in the frame. The number of character per line for the text field or the text area is the m spaces. As I say that earlier, that we are saying that approximate, that here we are saying that, or the minimum we can say that 20 character in a line, but this is not a precise, very precise. The reason is that the width of the different character can be different if you are using certain fonts. So for example, if you are typing the letter M which has the maximum width, then you can type the 20 character. But if you are typing the I which has a smaller width, then you can type more than 20 character. So when we define the text area or the text field, the number of character in a line are not very precise or not actually when we type in a text field. They can be more character can be typed. One more thing about the text area and the text field is that when we have typed something in the text field, it is being there in the text field as a string, and if you want to retrieve this information from the text field, then it is going to be retrieved as a string. And but if you are getting some input from the user to type some number, for example like a age of the user or something, then when we retrieve this information from the text field by the method getText, then it is going to be written or it is going to be retrieved like a text. If you want to use it as a number for some processing, then we have to convert this string into the integer or maybe to the double or the float. So some conversion is going to be required that when we are processing this values from the text field or the text area. Both the JText and the field and the JText area drive classes of the abstract class JTextComponent. Most of their methods are inherited from the JTextComponent and have the same meaning, except for some minor redefinition to account for having just one line or multiple line. So text field and the text areas are behaving much more in the same way. And some methods are there for these JComponent class, and we have discussed these methods like a get text or the text field or the text area is editable or not. So I'm not going to discuss the detail of each of these methods, but they are quite simple. If you just read the name of these methods, you will get the idea that what these methods are going to do. Now let's discuss one more complete example, a sewing calculator. GUI for simple calculator keeps a running total of the numbers. The user enter a number in the text field and then click either the plus or the minus buttons. The number in the text field is then added or subtracted from the running total and displayed in the text field. The value is kept in the instance variable result. When the GUI is first run or when the user click the reset button, the value result is set to the 0. In this program, basically we are going to provide a text field to the user. User is going to write or type some number in the text field, then pressing the plus or the minus button. So whatever the current value is there, the new value is going to be added to the current value. So every time the user can type the different value and then press the add and the minus button, and the current value is going to be updated. The result is going to be updated based on the existing value and the new value the user is typing. If the user enter a number in the incorrect format, then one of the method throw the number of format exception, because in this program the user has to enter the number, and as I told you that from the text field when we retrieve the value we have to convert back to the number if we want to perform some mathematical operation. So in some situation, if the rather than typing the number, the user is typing the string or maybe like a name, so in that case some exception can be thrown, number format exception. So we might have to handle this thing, we might have to write this message, and we may have to provide some opportunity to the user to correct the input. So let's see this program which has the name calculator. So I will discuss this example calculator. So before I am going to explain you this program, I am running this program, I am executing this program. So here this is the output for this program. Initially this text field is the empty, 3 buttons are there, plus, minus and the reset. I am typing some number, for example I am typing the number 5. I have to delete this text, I am selecting and then typing the 5, then I am pressing the button 5. Before the 5 the existing value was a 0, so this is something like a 0 plus 5, so result is coming as a 5. But after this now the current value is the 5, so I am typing, let's say 2. So the current value was the existing value was a 5, then I am typing the 2 and I am pressing the button plus. So it meaning that 5 being retrieved from the text field and the new value is going to be added because I am pressing the button plus. So it is going to show you the result 7. I am going to overwrite this 7, I am going to write 3. Then I am going to press the button plus. So again it will be 7 plus 3, which is going to be 10. Again I am deleting this value, I am going to write in the text field 4, but this time I am going to press the minus button. So it will be 10 minus 4, which is going to show the result 6. Anytime I press the button reset, which is going to reset the result as a 0. And then finally if I am going to type some string, here I am going to press the button plus, it is going to show you the message and error, re-enter the number. Now let's discuss about the code for this program. We have the similar construction, the class calculator extend the JFrame, implement the action listener interface. We are defining the width and height and the number of character for the text field. We are defining the text field object, and we are defining one more variable of the type double result, and again we are defining them as a class variable so we can access them in the action perform method. Initially the value of the result is a 0. In the main method we call the constructor for the class and we set the frame as a visible. In the constructor we do the same thing as we have done previously. Set the title, set default cross operation, set size. The layout for this frame as a border layout. The border layout means that the frame has the 5 areas are there: center, north, south, east, west. Now what we are going to do, first we are going to create some panel. We are going to create the text panel and setting the layout for this text panel as the flow layout. So things can be arranged, or the components can be arranged from the left to the right, top to the bottom in this panel, text panel. Now we are creating the text field, and initially we are giving the text in the text field, enter the number here. So it is going to be give initial message or the initial idea what to type in the text field. And the length for this text field is the number of digits we already defined, 30. So user can type the the minimum 30 character in the text field. Then setting the background for this text field as a white, and then adding the text field into the text panel. So this is going to be added like a first component, and then adding the text panel into the frame, into the north of the frame. So by calling the method add, we are adding the text panel. Then we are creating the one more panel, the button panel, setting the background for this panel as the blue, and again setting the layout for this button panel as the flow layout. So we have the similar layout as we have the text panel. In the text panel we have only the one component, that is the text field, but in the button panel we have the three buttons are there. We create the add button with the string as a plus. We register the listener for this button, add button, add action listener, and call this, and then adding this button into the button panel. Maybe I give some space here so we can see that separately. So then similarly we are creating the subtract button, registering a listener for this button, and then adding the button into the button panel. So this button has the string minus. Now finally we have created the reset button, and then registering the listener and adding this button to the panel, and then adding this button panel into the center of the frame. So you have seen that our button panel is in the center and our text panel was in the north. So when you see the output for this program, you see that button panel is looking quite big. So usually if you are using the center panel, you are not using the east and the west, and then other than the center, you use the north and the south. So usually the center panel looks bigger and the north and the south panel look smaller. So that's why this panel is looking bigger, because this is in the center of the frame. Now in the action perform method, because this program can throw some exceptions, so we are going to write the code in the try and the catch block. So if the things goes normally, we are going to call the method assume correct number, and we are passing the same object. Of course we can write our complete code here, whatever we are going to write in this assume the correct number format, but we can write a separate method which is the same thing as that if we are writing the code inside the try block. But if rather than typing the number, user is typing the string, then in the text field we are going to show the message error, re-enter the number. So now we have to see that what is there in the method incorrect number format, which is going to do the calculation. So from the same object, because we are passing this object here which contains information about the events, we call the method get action command to know that the user has pressed which button. So we are getting the string of the button. So if the user is pressing the plus button, then what to do? We are going to get the text from the text field. So we are calling the method get text. So get the text from the text field. Since we want to perform some arithmetic operation, we have to convert this text which we are assuming that which is a number, we are converting to the double by using this method string to double. I will discuss just after discussing this method. Then adding the result to the existing result which was there before typing the number in the text field. So adding to this, and then our final result will have this value, the previous value and the new number which the user is typing in the text field. Now we have to show the new results of this calculation into the text field. Then we have to call the method set text, and we have to pass this number, but we have to convert this number to the string because our text field is taking the string argument. So we have to call the method toString from the double class, and this is going to convert this number, the double number, into the string, and then showing this in the into the text field by the method set text. Similar operation is there for the method for the if the user is pressing the minus button, but only thing is that we are, rather than the plus, we are performing the subtraction operation. When the user is pressing the reset button, things are much more simple. Our result is going to be 0, and then we are going to set the value in the text field as the 0 as a string, 0.0 as a string. But if the user is not doing the thing correctly, we can write unexpected error. So here we have seen that there is a method string to double, which is converting the string into the double, which is this method. Again, we can write the method directly in the assume correct number format, but it's being written separately. So what we do here, so when we have a string object which we obtain from the text field, first we are performing that calling the method trim. The trim method means that if there are some spaces are there before or after this string, they are going to be removed, because sometimes the user press the space bar and then type, or maybe after typing the number user press the space bar. So we remove the spaces and then we convert this string into the double, so that we will have the built-in double type. So this type we are getting, but this method has to be called from the class double. So the double pass double is going to convert the string into the primitive type double, so which is going to return to this method string to double is going to return this value, and we are going to add this value to the result. So this was the execution of this program, simple calculator. So this is showing the output which I explained to you, the complete code, and they are talking about the unexpected exception. So there are some references are there, and of course the disclaimer and the fair usage statements are there. So I have completed the lecture. So thank you very much for listening the lecture.